Can I obviously introduce, because you've never been here before, have you? No, it's the first time, yeah. So it's always nice to have somebody new. So we'd like to welcome you. But I do believe we do have, just don't record this bit, you know, because we don't want the papers finding out about the picture we do have of you dancing, Ian. But for a sum of money, donated to a campaign of our choice, I'm sure we can give you the negatives as well. Ian Mearns is our new group parliamentary chair. He was elected in 2010 in Gateshead, and probably, I still believe you were the one of 16 in the party that asked for the party to oppose any further austerity. You call for the franchise of rail to be taken back into public ownership, and you believe in strengthening collective bargaining, and most importantly, a campaign that we were really proud of and pleased to support last year, just before the general election, was your call for the abolition of zero-hour contracts. So, conference, for the first time, please welcome our chair of our parliamentary group, Ian Mearns MP.
Well, Comrade President, Comrade General Secretary, and comrades, it's a real pleasure to be here, and what an honour, by the way, to follow Terry in the Shrewsbury 24 campaign. Along with Hillsborough, Orgreave, the blacklisting of trade unionists, the Shrewsbury 24 were criminal in a case. They were in a criminal case. It was a criminal case that was a criminal conspiracy instigated by government, by the police and by the security services against workers taking part in totally legitimate industrial action to protect their conditions of service. So, along with Hillsborough, along with Orgreave, along with the blacklisting of workers, Shrewsbury 24 is unfinished, comrades, unfinished business. Let's help them to finish that business. Well, comrades, it's also a real pleasure to be here and also to see a couple of comrades from my own constituency, and it's real nice to see Rachel Mullen here representing her branch in the northeast of England. And Rachel, by the way, one of 3 young women elected to Gateshead Council this year, 3 young women under 30 elected to Gateshead Council this year. And that council has a proud tradition of doing all of the right things. And I'm delighted to say, by the way, is the one council in the northeast of England who's holding out against this ridiculous concept of elected mayors being imposed on the people of the north of England. As Ian said, comrades, I've replaced John MacDonald as the chair of the parliamentary group. And John is a hard act to follow, but I'll certainly strive and try my best to do what I can. And can I thank Ian and Ronnie and the members of the executive for the welcome that I've had from them in my work in relationship with the Bakers Food and Allied Workers Union. It's been a real pleasure, and I hope that I'll be able to do that for many years to come, as long as you'll have me. I'm afraid to say that it's now 42 years since I joined the Labour Party and joined my first trade union, Nalgo, when I was working for British Gas. I started working for British Gas in 1974. It wasn't a particularly complicated job as an accounts clerk, but the first thing I did, as soon as I left the interview, was awarded the job, was to say to the personnel guy that appointed me, where do I join the union? And I joined Nalgo. Now, I'm afraid to say Nalgo was not a particularly militant union. And Nalgo was an acronym that stood for not a lot going on, I believe, back then. But we joined the union, and within a number of months I was elected as the political education officer for the union branch. I then went on and worked for British Gas for about 15 years and became a Gateshead councillor in 1983, and I served for 27 years as a Gateshead councillor. So when I was elected to Parliament in 2010, you could say I knew the patch a bit. I wasn't one of these people that had been parachuted in from another part of the country, particularly London, into a constituency in the northeast of England. And in 2010, the northeast of England rejected that type of candidate virtually unanimously across the board. So people like myself, Graham Morris in Easington, Ian Lavery in Wansbeck, Pat Glass in northwest Durham, local people representing their local constituencies and with real socialist values at the heart of what they're trying to take to Parliament. So in Parliament, I'm a member of the executive of the Trade Union Group, as well as Vice Chair of the Unite Group, Chair of the RMT Group, and also Chair of the Bakers Food and Allied Workers Union Group. Now, the reason I've had to take on those jobs is because there were a lot of jobs that were conducted by Jeremy and by John McDonnell. And since they became the leader and the Shadow Chancellor, they're no longer able to do those sort of jobs in Parliament. So, you know, it falls on people like me, sort of an ardent backbencher, as it were, to take up the cudgels on your behalf. And I was delighted to be asked to take over as chair of your parliamentary group when John became Shadow Chancellor, and I know that his fellow member of the group, Jeremy Corbyn, has sent his greetings to the conference. And what a difference a year makes. At last year's conference, we were still recovering from the loss of the general election, and it seemed unlikely that a left candidate would probably even get onto the ticket for the leadership election. And yet, what no one could have predicted actually happened. And just a few months later, Jeremy was elected leader of the Labour Party by a huge majority of the membership. And it's no secret that Jeremy has quite a few detractors in the parliamentary party. But the members and supporters of Labour have spoken and elected a leader committed to taking the fight to the Tories against austerity and against the exploitation of working people. A leader who's prepared to offer a real alternative to Tory ideology and put the rights of workers at the forefront of the agenda. Now, why are we suffering austerity? Why are the Tories doing this? It's nothing to do with the economy. The economy is pretty bumping along pretty fine. We are the 5th richest country in the world. The Tories keep telling us that, but they've instilled a programme of austerity so they can give tax cuts to their mates, so they can actually batten down public services and actually get us to a level of public expenditure which is more akin to the 1930s rather than the 2020s. Look at the way in which they're managing the whole process. Everyone, particularly in the north of England, is suffering from these huge cuts. And at the same time as making all of those cuts, because of the tax cuts that they're giving to their mates, they've managed to double the national debt in only 6 years. We've now got a national debt of £1.7 trillion, thanks to George Osborne's daft Osbornomics. And other attacks that will continue from this vicious Tory government. The anti-union reform set out in the Trade Union Bill represents the greatest attack on our movement since Thatcher. Indeed, Thatcher probably couldn't have dreamed of doing some of the stuff that the Tories set out in the Trade Union Bill. Introducing new thresholds for strike ballots, extensions of the required notice period for taking industrial action, introducing new requirements on picketing, and putting new burdens on certification officers. In the original draft of the bill, because I sat on the bill committee, they even wanted to outlaw the use of social media in the conduct of industrial disputes. They were actually thinking about introducing a crime of secondary and/or wildcat tweeting. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine that? That was in the consultation papers about the bill. And above all, the Act as it now is seeks to solve a problem that does not exist. We are not, even in the right-wing parlance of the Daily Mail and the Express, etc., the Sun, we are not the sick man of Europe when it comes to industrial disputes anymore. What is the problem that this Act is trying to solve? All it is about giving their mates in the city and in big business more tools to hit you and me with, and that's all it's about. It's about undermining the basic rights of employees, and that's all it's about, comrades, all it's about. The Tory government view the rights of workers as nothing more than a barrier to increased profits, a burden on business, a nuisance to dictatorial capitalism. Any attempts to defend those rights, to repel those attacks, ensures lifetime membership in the eyes of the partisan media, the BBC, the Sky, and the right-wing press, as being part of some sort of loony left. But just because you want to stand up for your rights. So let's be serious. It is the hard-working people up and down the country, across all sectors of society, who are propping up our struggling and austerity-decimated system. For the sole benefit of Dave and his mates, and I'm proud to support you all in your fight for fairness and equality. We've actually got a situation in my own region, the northeast of England. The ambulance service is 20% understaffed, but the ambulance service in the northeast of England relies on 195,000 hours of volunteer driver time to get people to and from hospital appointments. 195,000 hours a year. That's equivalent of about 130 to 150 full-time employees. That's Cameron's Britain in 2016. So we fought the bill every step of the way in Parliament, and members of the Bakers Group spoke at a number of protest rallies organised by the Trade Union Coordinating Group. We forced some concessions from government, opt-in to union political funds, on check-off and on electronic balloting. Now, I'm saying we forced those concessions. Actually, I think the concessions were given to the trade union movement to buy off the leaders of the big unions so that they would support the government in the EU referendum campaign. That's what I think. But despite all of that, the Act is now on the statute books, making it increasingly difficult for unions to take action to protect their workers, which leaves one simple question: why aren't the government taking similar action against bankers, spivs and speculators who overspent with our money, they speculated and overspent with our money and crashed the economy back in 2008? Well, the answer is simple. The Tory party continued to be propped up by the hedge funds, the mega-rich individuals. Cameron's dad himself was a stockbroker. And as we've seen in the last few months, he was actually indulging in activities which often straddle the boundaries of legality, often avoiding tax liabilities in sums greater than the vast majority of people in this country could only dream of. There were other attacks too, though, not just the trade union bill. The Housing and Planning Bill, where the Tories sought to introduce right to buy for housing association properties and to force councillors to sell off their most valuable council housing stock, further undermining the whole idea of security of tenancies. But it's not all bad news. We've had some sort of minor victories. Labour's opposition to the budget helped force a partial government retreat over their cuts to benefits to disabled people, but too little, too late, because a lot of disabled people are struggling and suffering as a result of the austerity cuts. We actually had, in the last Parliament, a really alarming statistic that 4 people a day were dying within 6 weeks of being declared fit for work through the work capability assessment for disabled and sick people. Can you imagine that? 4 people a day dying after being declared fit for work within 6 weeks of that declaration. And then what did the government do in response to that? They stopped collecting the statistics. So Ian Duncan Smith went, and we had another slight climb down on a different topic. The government have decided not to enforce academisation of schools. Well, whoopee, because they're going to do it by the back door. They want every school to become an academy. Do you know why? Because that's the way in which the government can privatise all of the back office services currently provided by local authorities to schools up and down the country, and they will do it. Despite the climb down, so-called, that they've had, they will do it via the back door and force schools to become academies by 2020-21. Your parliamentary group continues to meet approximately every 2 months to discuss issues of concerns to you and your members, and many of the group's members have been promoted to Labour's front bench, meaning they can't normally sign early day motions or participate in backbench debates. But obviously, it's useful having so many friends in positions of influence on our party policy. Now, moving on. Two Sisters National Living Wage implementation. I'd like to begin by offering support and solidarity of the parliamentary group to the Bakers Union members who are on strike at Pennine Foods in Sheffield and RF Brooks, Rogerstone, Newport, both of which are owned by the Two Sisters Food Group. My colleague Jill Furness, who has recently been elected in Sheffield, and Paul Flynn have both tabled early day motions on the parliamentary order paper to demonstrate our support. And I know that the parliamentary group has had dealings with their boss, Ranjit Singh Boparan, in the past and questioned his business model, which is based on attacking terms and conditions and asset stripping many of the small firms he's bought up, resulting in the loss of hundreds of jobs. This time, his managers are trying to offset the costs of meeting George Osborne's bogus national living wage. It's not a national living wage at all. It's not a living wage, quite frankly, because it doesn't agree with the criteria set by the Living Wage Foundation. And how can it be national when it precludes young people? They're part of the nation as well. That's totally wrong. That's not a national living wage and shouldn't even be considered to be calling that. But they're clawing back money now through a tax on weekend and premium shift payments, overtime and other terms and conditions. So my colleague Joan Ryan talked in the House about a similar thing happening at Samworth Brothers site where they make saurine malt loaf. And I used to like saurine malt loaf, but I haven't eaten it for quite some time. And they've just sacked a union rep at Kettleby Foods, Leicestershire, for seeking union recognition. So we'll be trying to raise that issue in Parliament to make sure that that worker is reinstated immediately. So comrades, this is happening across the industry and in other industries, blighted by low pay as well as services like retail and catering. So we'll do everything we can to support you and make sure we hold the bosses and the government to account. The parliamentary group continues to support the Bakers Fast Foods Rights campaign and have raised the importance of the fight against 0 hours contracts and low pay at global multinationals like McDonald's. In the last Parliament, I introduced a private member's bill on 0 hours contracts, which was talked out by the Tories. That is another piece of unfinished business, and I, for one, will not let that go away. The campaign that was launched in the United States shows that when workers get organised, they can fight for and win a wage that you can afford to live on. They should be paying at least £10 an hour, comrades, and that should be regardless of whether you're 16, 19, 21 or 25. Young people deserve a real living wage. There's no justification for making vast profits by exploiting the young. So when some Labour MPs try to attack the Labour Party nationally's decision to stop McDonald's from exhibiting at the annual conference, I tabled an early day motion in support of the union's campaign and defending the exclusion of a firm which won't recognise trade unions and exploits people on 0 hours contracts. And as has been mentioned, we recently met a delegation from the Unite Workers of New Zealand who successfully campaigned to defeat 0 hours contracts in their country. And they came to Parliament to discuss how we might achieve the same here. We will continue on with that fight. The parliamentary group understands the problem that competition on price between the big supermarkets leads to unfair pressure on suppliers to drive down pay and conditions of workers, and similar problems exist in other industries, e.g. the National Farmers Union are campaigning over milk prices, meat prices, etc. So in the next few weeks, The Business Innovation and Skills Department is set to open a consultation on the Groceries Code adjudicator, including her performance and remit. The parliamentary group will work in coalition with other concerned organisations such as the NFU, War on Want, Fair Trade Foundation, Tradecraft, and of course other TUC unions to lobby for the adjudicator to be given extra resources and power to tackle abusive practices by the big retailers. Comrades, on 0 hours contracts, we continue the fight. On agency workers, I was so impressed by the debate you had this morning. It isn't just in your industry. School teachers, nurses, cleaners, shop workers, receptionists, all getting jobs via agencies. Comrades, the agencies are parasites, nothing more, nothing less. In the public sector, they suck money out of your public services and depress wages, terms and conditions for full-time employees. They must be taken on. We've also been kicking up the pressure for you in this industry on bakers' asthma. And the campaign has helped to result in proposals from the parliamentary group on the Workplace Health Expert Committee on the Health and Safety Executive, and has launched an inquiry into bakers' asthma. This is led by Professor Sir Anthony Newman-Taylor and Professor Paul Cullinan of the Royal Brompton Hospital, world-renowned experts on occupational asthma who've previously attended meetings of our group, and their provisional findings recommended devoting extra resources to the problem and developing ways of reducing exposure to flour, improvers, and other bakers' dusts hazards. And of course, outside, fingers crossed, it's hopefully going to be getting warmer for the summer. Well, it's nice being warmer in the summer when you're having a day off, but when you're at work and it's really hot, it can be a real problem for people. And by the way, I work in a place where it gets really hot all the time because the hot air in there has to be heard to be believed, frankly. So we will continue to campaign on the Cool It campaign for a maximum working temperature for all employees in all industries. A coalition of unions, including Unite, the CWU, Musicians Union, National Union of Teachers, National Association of Schoolmasters and Women Teachers, PCS, RMT, and others, have come together to call for action to introduce a statutory maximum temperature beyond which employers would have a legal duty to introduce industry-appropriate cooling measures. This is now TUC policy, and Labour went into the general election promising to review all legislation and guidance in this area, and we're keen to make sure this commitment doesn't fall off the agenda while we're in opposition. Comrades, the Bakers Union group of MPs in Parliament will continue to work to raise the profile of the issues which affect you, the members on the shop floor and in the stores. The election of Jeremy Corbyn has had a great effect on the trade union movement within Parliament, and a number of my colleagues among the movement have been given positions on the front bench, as I've mentioned. So they ensure that we are once again properly represented within the party and in the Commons. And we continue to work closely with colleagues and neighbouring unions, and we continue to raise parliamentary questions in the chamber, early day motions, and we continue to host events in the Commons to support causes close to all of our hearts. The next 12 months is set to be of interest and an interesting time, irrespective of the result next Thursday. We've seen the Tories split down the middle. That's all you've seen on the telly, blue on blue action. Sadly, though, that will leave us still in the face of a very, very right-wing Tory party, no matter who leads it after the referendum. I personally believe Cameron is toast, and I hope it's good quality toast, being here with the Bakers Conference, but I believe he's toast. We've not been trouble-free ourselves as a party. There have been significant shockwaves through the ranks of the parliamentary party, many of whom have found it very difficult to come to terms with the democratic will of hundreds of thousands of Labour Party members. But with colleagues taking exception to the incredible mandate that Jeremy got, our membership has never been higher. And we must not lose sight of the fact that the Labour Party and the trade union movement working together can produce real positive outcomes and positive results. So now is the time for us all to work together, to pull in the same direction, to continue to fight for working people and for the principles we all believe in: social justice, common ownership and socialism. As MPs, my colleagues and I will continue to fight your corner, continue to raise the issues that affect ordinary working people in this union, and fight to make sure your voices and opinions are heard in what is supposed to be the heart of democracy. But comrades, now the Labour Party in the country has a new purpose, direction, and we've got a new leader. We are now seen by many as the voice of working people once again. The very purpose which conceived our party in the first place, to fight for the rights of working people, and the very principle which runs to the core of you here in the Bakers and Allied Workers Union. One thing is abundantly clear: the most effective way to end the pernicious attacks on the trade union and the Labour movement are to make sure that the Labour Party wins the next general election. And we must work together to ensure that that happens, to put principles ahead of posturing and results ahead of rhetoric, to put hard-working people like yourselves at the forefront of the debate. Not the billionaires, not the multinationals, not the self-serving rich and tycoons, to ensure that those in the greatest need receive the support they so desperately require, and to make sure that those at the top of the chain contribute their fair share to make that happen. Comrades, I don't expect to follow my predecessor, John MacDonald, as your chair, as to become Shadow Chancellor anytime soon. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to address you, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of your conference. And I hope that I have the opportunity to come back. It's been a real honour. Thank you very much indeed.
Well done, Ian. Thank you very much.